Samuel nodded once and hurried from the room to summon the other adventuresses. Founded in 1900, while women in most parts of Australia were still fighting for the right to vote, the Adventuresses Club of the Antipodes was variously home, or home away from home, to a number of women from all walks of life. Women of outstanding achievement, women of skill and talent, women whose courage and tenacity was beyond question. In short, women of vision, who pushed against the limits of 1964 society, found kindred spirits within the walls of the mansion on Greenwood Place. Samuel traced a path through the building, opening doors, knocking discreetly, or raising his voice depending on the adventuress he was trying to rouse. In the ballroom, two women were engaged in a fencing bout, almost dancing across the floor in a series of parries and ripostes. At the sight of Samuel, they stopped and raised their masks. "Meeting, Camelot Room," he said. Leaning out a window, he spotted botanist Minnie Bell kneeling among the plants. "Dr. Bell, Camelot Room." As word spread, adventuresses began to appear, alerted by their colleagues or by the atmosphere now filling the house, anxiety, anticipation, and a sense of foreboding. Samuel knocked on one last door, swinging it open without waiting for a reply. Inside, Violetta Fellini was engrossed in an experiment. Not wanting to interrupt, he paused and watched for a moment. Violetta was a study in contrasts, a classic beauty with a strict Italian upbringing who had never married, a warm and generous personality disguised by a severe hairstyle, and a shyness that at one time had tended to hide a brilliant scientific mind. It was only when she found the Adventuresses Club that Violetta began to feel comfortable in her own skin. Now, in her state-of-the-art laboratory, every movement was deft and assured, and her face was continually lighting up with the joy of discovery. A beaker of blue liquid bubbled over a Bunsen burner. Violetta drew a minuscule quantity of something brown from a test tube and, using a long pipette, carefully added 2 drops to the beaker. There was a whoosh as the liquid turned clear, and her face was momentarily hidden by a cloud of smoke. When it dispersed, she was smiling. But then she saw Samuel, and the smile fell away. "Has it arrived, then?" she asked, replacing her safety goggles with a pair of glasses. "Just now. Birdie's called a meeting." Violetta removed her white coat, then together they made their way through the building. There were only 2 empty chairs remaining when they arrived in the Camelot Room. Violetta slid into the one bearing her name as Samuel softly closed the door and took up a position in the corner, shoulders resting against the gilt-embossed wall. "This is all they found." Birdie addressed the room as she lifted the mud-smeared gun from the box and placed it gently on the table in front of her. The air in the Camelot Room rippled with the collective sigh of the assembled women. "But surely," began one of the adventuresses, before subsiding, her question unasked. "So, they've given up," Violetta said. Birdie held up a hand in a gesture that was half calming, half resigned. "Officially, the search for the crash site is over. However, Tribal Chief Kabui said he is eternally grateful that his son's murder was solved, and he assures us he will never stop searching the highlands of Papua New Guinea for Phryne Fisher. And if anyone could survive a plane crash in the jungle, it's Phryne." Samuel's consoling words did nothing to raise the spirits of the assembled women. "But without her gun," someone murmured. "Even without a gun, and regardless of the situation, Phryne Fisher would have plenty of resources at her disposal. And above all, she has her ingenuity." Birdie placed both fists on the table and leaned forward. Around the room, heads nodded. There were murmurs of approval, and even a faint, "Hear, hear." Out in the hallway, the grandmother clock began to strike, and the gathering fell still as the Westminster quarters rang out and the hours tolled. The ensuing silence was heavy with portent. Finally, Violetta cleared her throat. "Has the letter already been..."